guys had to be honest, like how much do you guys miss the whole close to broke thing? I don't know, let me know down below. Does it really matter to you guys? Welcome back everyone to another episode. It is a wonderful day out today. The weather is amazing. Shout out to California. I guess this is the California tax that you pay. Here we are, another day at the Lucky Lady Casino. If you guys ever want to play here, we're slightly changing, by the way, modifying how we do things here. I used to host the game on Sundays at 1 p.m. We're changing that to Sunday at 5 p.m. Me and Sean, he heads the room at that time on Sunday. He's gonna help get the game going. So if you ever want to play yellow chip games, 2-3, hopefully we can get 2-5 and some PLO games going, you guys can come here every Sunday and expect to get the best service, free food, free wonderful time, good vibes, and I usually bring bottles of wine with me. Poker is on the menu for me today. I'm gonna go in there, hop in, hopefully have a good time. I'm running on E right now, very little sleep, had a long work day today. Outside of that, I hope you guys have a lovely day. Let's enjoy today's session. I'm feeling good about it. Hopefully we can win. Let's get on a heater, baby. Let's go.
Little did I know that moments after filming that intro, I'd be getting myself into what will be one of the craziest poker sessions of my life. The swings are going to be there, the excitement is there, and the stand-up game is back to make us play some big pots. The stand-up game definitely levels the playing field. Let's hop into the very first hand of note. For the rest of today's session, just understand that the infinite army game that I mentioned beforehand is going to be in today's game. If you weren't here for the last lesson in which I described it, to briefly go over it, the army man game is similar to the stand-up game, in which every single player has to win a hand, and the last person to do so, or who doesn't win the hand, has to pay out a bounty of X amount of dollars to each player. In the infinite army game, you win army men for every single pot that you win in Showdown your hand. Exciting, even more so when somebody can literally sit down, watch, go card dead, and watch as the entire table wins 3 hands over, which means, yes, you have to pay 3 bounties per player. Well, enough of that. Class is in session, folks. First hand of note, we have a fun one. I make it $100 under the gun when I look down at 6-5 of spades. We go ahead and open it up here. The small blind, the big blind, and the straddle all make the call. We're going off to a flop here that comes out Jack 7-4. There is a spade out there. We also have an open ender. With the action checking over to me, we don't want to have to pay this bounty, and this is a great flop for us to build a pot. So I make it 300. We get 2 callers here, which is definitely worrisome. And when we're going off to a turn card that comes out of 7 of clubs, I don't love it. But with the action checked over to me and this $100 infinite bounty game per person in effect, I need to take advantage and seize the moment. If there was ever a time to double barrel, it is now, baby. I make it $800 to go. I am shivering in my boots. I'm going for gusto, and by golly, do I hope it works. After a brief moment of thinking, we don't have to sweat it. We get 2 folds, and just like that, with 6 high, we fade the bounty. All right, now that we are safe from said bounty game, we continue along. In this next hand, under the gun is where I am. I make it $100 to go. 10-9 offsuit is not a good hand, but we are playing fairly short-handed here. We end up getting a call here, or I should say a 3-bet from the small blind of 400, to which the big blind, the straddler call as well. I mean, come on, I can't be folding to these pot odds, so I go ahead and make the call. We're going off to a flop that comes out 10-3-3. We flop top pair here on a flush draw board that is paired with the action checked over to the straddler. He throws out a c-bet of 600. I shouldn't say a c-bet. He takes for the betting lead. Now, with the action on me here, I just make the call here, inviting the small blind raiser to go ahead and make the call as well. We're going off to a turn card that comes out the 6 of diamonds. Once again, the action checks the straddler, who decides to size up a bit here and bet 1.4 thousand. The action is now on me, and my opponent does not have an army man, which is a little worrisome, knowing that he can definitely be making a play at the pot. But once again, I go deep into the tank and I think about my options here. It would be really unfortunate if my opponent is now turning a hand that turns some extra equity into a bluff. A hand like 8-9 or 7-8 of spades definitely come into mind. And against my better intuition and judgment, I go ahead and make the fold. The small blind inevitably folds as well, but luckily for us, we get to see what the straddler shows, and he shows a set of 6s. Okay. Yet another hand of a bunch of debauchery to go over. There's a couple of limps in the actions on me here with King 10 offsuit. Definitely a hand that I can value isolate here for 300, which I go ahead and do. The big line of the cutoff make the call. Definitely some players that are 100% gonna make me earn every penny I make and make it hurt every time I lose. We're going off to a flop 3 ways that comes out 8 high. Not a great flop for really me or maybe anyone else, I don't know. But when the action checks me, I decided to throw out a c-bet for 300 and one of our opponents makes the call. We're going off to a turn card here that comes out the Jack of Clubs. Seems like a good card for me to continue bluffing on. Our opponent goes ahead and makes a call, and the river card comes out the Jack of Spades. At this point, I go ahead and check it over to my opponent, who decides to put me all in for $3,000. You might be asking yourself, Kieran, why are you going over this hand and why have you not folded yet? Those are all very good questions, and let me tell you something a little bit about my opponent. My opponent is not one to shy away from action or, going for gusto. I'm frustrated because I feel like I should have probably made the move, and now I've allowed him to make the move. And the only thing that I can think about is there's a world where my opponent is obviously bluffing with the better hand, like an ace high. I go ahead and make the fold. Our opponent shows his hand, and he shows king 9. Oh, man. We had the right read. Did not put him on that specific hand, but we would have called, and that would have been an incredible hero call if I made it. Happy I even thought about it, but again, can't give yourself a pat in the back for a loss anyways. But, at least we thought about it. Continuing to go along here, early position raises to 300. I'm in the small blind, and I look down at queen 10 offsuit. At this point, this hand is against the player from the last hand. My goal is to earn some of my dollars back, so I make that call with a pretty speculative hand, and we're going off to a flop where we get top pair. When I check it over to him, he bets 300. My goal is to put more money in the middle when I think I have the best hand in poker, so I'm going to go ahead and do so. I raise to 800. My opponent does not even let me finish the betting motion, as you can see, as he snap jams all in. Just like that, in a matter of seconds, a split second, there is now a $15,000 pot going on right now. But just to, slow down the variance, we're going to go ahead and run it twice when our opponent asks us to do so. The first board comes out with an 8 of diamonds and then the 8 of clubs on the turn. The second board comes out the 7 of clubs, to which my opponent says very loudly, he got there, and he shows 7 deuce offsuit. The pain, the misery. A $15,000 pot that we're going to go ahead and chop up as a massive favorite. Not something I'm too happy about, but hey, at the end of the day, could have easily been the first one that we got unlucky on. Action starts off with under the gun raising to 100. I'm next to act, and we finally have the chance to play with some real cards and not napkins. We look down at Big Slick. I go ahead and 3-bet to 400 here. The small blind cold calls and the initial raiser calls as well. Was expecting him to throw out a little 4-bet here with the dead money, but here we go. 3 ways off to a flop. Hopefully the poker gods make it easy, and in fact, they do. Ace 6-6 here. We flop what feels like the absolute nuts. I go ahead and size up a bit here. I make it 800, going about 2/3 here. My goal, as we've talked about earlier, is probably get some money in the middle when we have a good hand and let the rest of it all fall where it may. We end up getting a call from the initial raiser, which is great. And then the turn card comes the 4 of clubs. With the action once again checked over to me, I'm in between a couple of options. I do have, like I said, somewhere in the neighborhood about $7,000 to $8,000 to start. The likelihood of me getting all of this money in the middle here is very unlikely, but the goal should be to get as much money as I can out of this pot with a good hand, but I end up deciding to land on $1,500. But unfortunately for us, our opponent makes the fold. Luckily for us, we do get an army man for the hand and our efforts, an extra $100 in my pocket. More poker hands to go over, with the action folding to me in the straddle. I look down at King Jack offsuit. I race to 200, to which the double straddler decides to make the call. We're going off to a flop here where once again we are greeted with a fairly easy one. I make top pair, 2 pair to be exact, with a pretty decent kicker. I throw out a c-bet here, a pretty sizable one of 300, and my opponent calls. Not much changes here on the turn, 8 of hearts. I make it 400 here. Luckily for us, our opponent just flats call here, and we're going off to a river card. That's a really weird one, as it comes the 8 of clubs. So when I make it 100, my opponent thinks about it for a second before deciding to raise to 1.1k. I pretty quickly make the call, and my opponent shows pocket 9. So definitely a pretty fun little bluff for him there, as he's blocking the straight, obviously, as well as a hand like 9-8 suited. But unfortunate for him, he ran into somebody that couldn't fold, and looks like the blocker bet definitely helped us out there. Speaking of all the 8s and the 7s out in the last hand, we look down at a suited 8-7. In the cutoff, I go ahead and raise to $60, the smallest raise we're going to see all day, it feels like. The button calls, and then the straddler 3-bets to 300. We both make the call, and we're going off to a flop here that comes out 8-5-3 rainbow. Actions on the straddler, who decides to start a big sizable bet of 600. I call, and so does the button. This pot is now getting big, and the turn card comes out the 10 of hearts. Not my favorite card here, is a couple of obvious hands that will be isolating to improve. The action, as predicted, ends up checking through. We're going off to the river. Just to make matters worse, that comes out the jack of diamonds. At this point, once again, the action checks through, and then the straddler shows ace jack here, so ends up rivering all of us. I'm a little disappointed. I think throwing out a small prodder bet on the turn might have got the job done and brought me the pot when I had the best hand, but I ended up playing it a little passively and allowing my opponent to get there on the river, and we ended up losing a pretty sizable pot, to be fair. Let me know if any of y'all would have played that last hand any different. Like I said, I'm pretty interested to see what you guys would say. Maybe I'm a little bit results oriented by saying I should have bet the turn, but it feels like it would have probably got the job done. Nonetheless, we have one more hand of note here to go over. I look down at the old jacket of hearts, and I make it $50 to go here. Too lazy to grab more than 2 chips, and that's just what I make it. The big blind and the straddler make the call. We're going off to a flop here that looks favorable for what they call my range, but also does provide me with a gutter ball to a straight. With the action on me, I throw out a pretty big c-bet, about 2/3 here, and then the big blind calls. The turn card comes out the 5 of clubs, bringing it back to a flush. Doesn't change anything for me. When the action checks over to me, I decide that this is going to be a hand that I decide to probably go 3 barrels with if the runout allows me to. So I make it 350, and my opponent calls once again. River card comes out the 4 of spades, which once again seems pretty innocuous. I go for $600 bet. I don't think I'd be going too massive here, but it is all for naught when my opponent raises to 2,000. A little bit unfortunate there. I'm happy I went for it on a board that I think once again was in my favor. That will close our session there. Losing a little bit extra there was not awesome, but once again, a fun session nonetheless. Thank you guys so much for joining in today's episode. Let's start over me in the post-credit sequence to see how we feel after once again another incredibly fun session here with the Lucky Lady.
I can do this with my eyes closed. It's too easy.
All right, so a couple days removed from that last session, currently having dinner with Stephanie. That last session was kind of all over the place. Obviously, things turn out significantly different if we can hold there against a good friend in that $15,000 pot, but things didn't turn out in my favor. I mean, to be quite fair, it didn't feel like a lot really went totally in my favor. I feel like we misplayed quite a bit, and things obviously could have went worse. Then ended up going okay though. We were into the game for 6,000 and out for 6.2. So par for 200 in a game where most people are swinging 5 figures. For me to be swinging the lower 3 figures is a little disappointing, but I mean, we'll take it at the end of the day. A win is a win, is always a win. So that's probably going to do it for me tonight. We have some fun stuff to continue along forward, and a big announcement. I'm starting Close to Scratch, which is my golf channel. So if you guys want to head over there and subscribe, the link will be at the top of the description. You should be expecting some fun videos out there. We have a really massive prop bet worth over 6 figures, and that's the entire premise of the channel. Some fun vlogging. You'll see some good friends in the poker world in there as well. Outside of that, I'm going to enjoy my dinner. I'll see you guys soon.